Does Ethiopia face greater threats from abroad or from within? Just a few weeks ago, it was potential war with Eritrea causing the most concern. But today, a war in the second largest state of Amhara looks even more threatening. As the Amhara Fano People's Organization claims ethnic cleansing by the government in Addis is another brutal civil war set to intensify in Ethiopia. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's Newsmaker is Amhara. Well, it's difficult to find as fractured a country as Ethiopia, with different states and tribes claiming ethnic cleansing and even genocide at the hands of the government, as well as various militia. For years, the state of Tigray had the world's attention as a brutal war played out there, and now the front has moved to Amhara. Amharan militia had earlier fought alongside government and Eritrean troops against Tigrayan forces, only to claim later they were betrayed by leaders in Addis. So today, it's Amharan militia claiming they are under attack and being ethnically cleansed. So is that the case? Or is an ethno-nationalist rebellion further destabilizing a country that is desperately seeking unity? Here's a look.
From one civil war into the cusp of another, observers look at Ethiopia with alarm. The Amhara region in the country's north has been in the grip of fighting and violent clashes since 2023. Less than a year after a civil war in the neighbouring Tigray region of Ethiopia officially ended. Amhara shares a border with Tigray, and during the Tigray War, which began in 2020, armed groups and militias from the Amhara region, known as Fano fighters, aligned with both the Ethiopian National Army and neighbouring country Eritrea. Eritrea later fell out with Ethiopia over the 2022 peace talks. But so did Amhara, embittered by a deepening sense of marginalisation from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. As far back as August 2023, the UN had been warning of human rights abuses in Amhara, as Ethiopian Federal forces began to turn against Fano fighters that they once fought alongside in neighbouring Tigray.
We are very concerned by the deteriorating human rights situation in some regions of Ethiopia. In Amhara region, following a flare-up in clashes between the Ethiopian military and the regional Fano militia, and the declaration of a state of emergency on 4th August, the situation worsened considerably. At least 183 people have been killed in clashes since July.
In 2024, Human Rights Watch claimed that the Ethiopian army had killed civilians in the town of Marawi, deep in Amhara territory, a claim the Ethiopian government refutes. Since then, the violence has not abated and the crisis continues. International aid groups struggle to provide assistance in a region difficult to access from outside.
And since October 2023, the government has been battling against the Fano armed forces or militias in a very bloody war. And recently, beginning of October, in eastern Amhara, we faced indeed an avalanche of requests and humanitarian needs. So we've been transporting critically injured patients to receive specialized treatments, again, war surgeries. But we've also been visiting prisoners in places of detention that hosted indeed those fighters.
In October of this year, Fano released a manifesto declaring that the Amhara people demand justice, truth-seeking, and a counter to the false narratives that they say Ethiopian Federal political forces have been spreading about the Amhara region. While it doesn't call for a coup, the manifesto does call for major overhaul of government, a total separation of religion from government affairs. Calls for an independent Amhara breakaway nation are conspicuously absent. The manifesto makes it clear that Amhara sees itself as a region within Ethiopia, not a separate nation. But in a country where society is in a constant battle between the pull towards centralisation and the desire for regionalisation, lofty calls for a diverse, federated nation of peaceful regions may remain little more than words in an ambitious manifesto.
Let's get the perspective now of an Amhara Fano leader. The Ethiopian government has at several points labeled Eskinder Nega a treasonist and a terrorist, and he has served time in prison for those charges. He is now the chairperson of the Amhara Fano People's Organization, and he joins us now on the phone from his home region. Eskinder Nega, thank you so much for joining us on the Newsmakers.
Thank you for having me.
You know what, I'll let you begin then by telling us why you wanted to appear on this program. You were on the phone out of security concerns. So what do you think needs to be said about the conflict in your region?
Well, there's this huge misconception about the Amhara war of self-defense in the international community, and that needs to be cleared. So, you know, I'm here to clear what misconceptions and misunderstandings there are about our cause. So that's why I'm here. Okay,
you've just called it a war of self-defense. So you and several other ethnic groups in the country say that you are the victims of the government's ethnic cleansing campaign. However, your critics have said that you are actually an ethno-nationalist leader seeking to bring back Amhara dominance while claiming to want national unity. So which is it?
Well, we're certainly not an ethno-nationalist organization seeking ethnic empowerment. That should be clear. In fact, on the contrary, we are fighting, identity politics, ethnic-based, hate-infused politics. So we're exactly the opposite of what is being said about us. I know that ethnic groups, both in Ethiopia and elsewhere in Africa, are, almost exclusively about ethnic empowerment, about political and economic empowerment, but not us. Because, when you look at the genesis of the Amhara struggle, if you look at the genesis of the Fano movement, it was a reaction to the state, both at the federal and at the regional level. Killing Amharas on the basis of their identity in the thousands, in hundreds of thousands, by the way.
Okay.
So we reacted to mass killings by the state against the Amharas.
So what then about the
our
claims?
Genesis is different.
I'm sorry. What about the claims then that Fano forces, your forces, are now working with the TPLF and with Eritrean forces, your former enemies, to bring down Abiy Ahmed's government? Your forces have also been accused of ethnically cleansing Tigrayans, we must mention, during the war there, in regions that you actually claim to be part of Amhara.
Well, I mean, this is, there's so much that's being said because this is the age of the internet. And if you have social media, all sorts of things could be said about you, about the group. But this is not unique for us. I think this is a worldwide phenomenon. But as to the charge that we're working with the TPLF, that's completely incorrect, and I state that categorically. As far as our survival, the means through which we are fighting the government, it should be clear that we do not, have an external supporter. We are sustaining this struggle on the shoulders of the farmers, who constitute, about 85% of the population, of the Amhara population. On top of that, we have some donations from the diaspora, a small amount. And of course, we rely for munitions from the battlefield, from what we capture from government troops. So it should be clear that we're very self-sufficient. It's a very self-sufficient movement. We do not rely on external support for defending ourselves from genocide.
Okay, then explain more about what is actually happening to your people now, including the civilians in your area, because the director of the International Committee of the Red Cross actually told us in our report that they are facing, as he said, an avalanche of requests and humanitarian needs and transporting critically injured patients for treatments and surgeries. Are you in large part then responsible for that by taking up arms in this fight?
No, we're not. We're not. It's the government. The government attacked us, and we had no choice but to defend ourselves. Like I said, on the basis of our ethnicity. This is mass killings, irrespective of who we are. The children. There was no exception for infants. There was no exception for pregnant women. There was no exception for elderly people. The government troops just rounded up everyone and shot them. And this was not one or two incidents. There was a clear pattern, and the problem was growing. And we did not resort to force of arms. We did not resort to defending ourselves through force of arms. At first, what we tried to do was to solve the problem through peaceful means. And when that did not, produce results, when that did not work, we had to defend ourselves.
Okay, but
by force of arms. And what I'm saying is, so we are not responsible for the humanitarian crisis that's happening in that region. Yes, there is a humanitarian crisis, but the political and morally and politically, the party that's responsible for this is the government, the genocidal governments that's attacking its own citizens on the basis of ethnicity.
Okay, but then the term ethno-nationalism is constantly used to describe your movement. That term alone does not infer a group that wants unity with other tribes across Ethiopia, and many accuse you of wanting an independent Amhara nationalist state.
Oh, that's just completely, that's baloney. I'm sorry for using this word, but that's complete baloney. That's an American expression, but that's completely false. We're not seeking for independence. We're not an ethno-nationalist organization that wants to build walls between ethnic groups. In fact, we want the walls that has been erected by the government between ethnic groups to fall. We want to build bridges. We are constituted, and we, along ethnic lines, because we are defending ourselves from an ethnically, from an ethnic-based attacks by the state. But
okay,
see that the solution. We see that the solution is not in ethnicity. We see that the solution is not in identity politics. Ethiopia has to move beyond ethnic politics. We believe in that. So this is like, this is like an antidote to the politicization of ethnicity. That's our ultimate goal. But to do that, first we have to defend ourselves. We have to defend ourselves on the basis of ethnicity. But the end result, we recognize that the end result, that the way for this nation to come out of this crisis, out of this permanent, cycle of war, is to move the country and the nation, our politics, beyond ethnicity. We need to de-emphasize the politicization of identity. So we need a politics based on ideas. We need the normalization of our politics. We need to go into the mainstream, into the African mainstream. And the African mainstream is that, and the identity politics is discouraged by the state.
What you're describing
constitutionally.
Sure.
And that's what we want.
That sounds ideal.
And that's what we want.
That sounds ideal. But
Yeah,
please explain how organizations like yours can coexist with fellow ethnic and tribal groups and their respective militias if each of you wants recognition for historic grievances while also claiming you're the victims of human rights abuses, not just by the government, but also by other competing ethnic militia.
Well, we want to forge an alliance with other ethnic and Ethiopian forces, and even regional forces, by the way, that wants to de-emphasize, like I said, ethnic politics, that wants to move both Ethiopia and the region, the Horn of Africa, beyond ethnic politics. And as it's done elsewhere in Africa, in Ethiopia, what has been done is there's a constitutional entanglement. There's constitutional marriage between ethnicity, identity politics, and the constitution. It's constitutional mandated. We need to change the constitution, and we need a constitution that does not, that does not encourage ethnic politics, identity politics. So, how do we, partner with other tribal groups, like you said, and other ethnic groups and other political forces, if they have a vision, if they believe that the nation needs to go beyond ethnic politics, if they believe that that the problem, the genesis of our problem, our problem revolves around identity politics, and if they want to move the country, beyond identity politics, then we could partner and move this country out of ethnicity, out of the politics of ethnicity, out of the
Okay.
politics of identity. So
So,
that will be the basis. That will be the basis of our alliance. We need partners who hate identity politics, who do not believe in identity politics, and who see that who see that this country needs to move beyond identity politics.
okay, then
So
you
that's what
in particular would have to let go of any past grievances and a horrific conflict with Tigrayan forces that Amharan forces were involved in. Do you believe really that all of these groups would be willing to let go of the past, the very recent past in some cases, perhaps grant amnesties and move on?
Of course, why not? We have to move on. We can't be tied to to our back history. We can't be, we shouldn't be prisoners of history, of our back history. We should be looking forward.
Okay.
No, but the problem is just you have mentioned some organizations, the ethnic-based organizations in Ethiopia believe in ethnic politics. They believe in perpetuating ethnic politics. They want they want the constitution. They don't want to change the constitution. Almost all ethnic-based organizations, except the Fano movement, except the Amhara-based ethnic organizations, want to preserve the constitution, which mandates, which insists that the country's politics should be on the basis of identity, particularly ethnicity. That the constitution has created this ethnic enclaves.
Okay.
And what it has done is fractured the country. We do not have a federation. What we have is a fractured. So we need to change the constitution, and we need a constitution like other African countries that de-emphasizes, that discourages ethnic politics. That's what we're saying, and we need Ethiopian forces that accept this. We need regional forces that that see things like we do, and we need international partners.
Okay.
That would help us to move the country beyond ethnic politics. Unless we move out of ethnic politics, this will eventuate. The final story. The final story of this crisis will be genocide on a mass scale, even worse than what had happened in Rwanda.
Eskinder
So
Nega.
now is the time. Yeah.
Okay, that will unfortunately have to be the final word for this segment of the Newsmakers. I greatly appreciate you sharing your insights and your feelings on this conflict. Thank you so much. Well, let's get further analysis now of Ethiopia's Amhara conflict, as well as the question of attaining peace nationwide. I'm joined now from Washington by senior journalist and political commentator on Ethiopia and African affairs, Omer Reddy, and from Harrisonburg, Virginia, lawyer, human rights advocate, and peace builder, Getachal Tamari. Unfortunately, we reached out to the Ethiopian government for representation. However, no one was able to attend. So, Omer, I will begin with you. You heard the interview there. Tell me what you make of that analysis, that Ethiopia just needs to get past its identity politics. It needs to change its constitution at a fundamental level. And do you think of Fano, what some consider the Fano rebel leader, as the right person to communicate that message?
Thank you, Andrea. I would look at it in two ways. Fundamentally, as a general political issue in Ethiopia, I would share the view that the ethnic polarization and the unnecessary, unfortunate ethnic empowerment over the past 30 plus years has led the country to this stage. And if it continues in that trajectory, in that path, it only creates more and more ethnically oriented crisis in the country endlessly. So the country indeed needs to address that issue, has to come out of that ethnic federal arrangement. It has done more than a test of this project, the ethnic federal project that the TPLF-led EPRDF instituted in Ethiopia. And I think we all know by now it has proven perilous, very dangerous. So I would agree with
Okay.
as to who made that suggestion. I would not put myself in that position to make the judgment, but what I would say is it's unfortunate that Ethiopia is in the current crisis in the Amhara region, particularly. I would put it as, from the federal government's point of view, I would put it as a self-inflicted wound that continues to bleed the country.
Okay.
These could have been avoided had the federal government been cautious and very accommodative of the concerns and the mistrust the Amhara naturally had because of the because I believe they have been victimized by the ethnic federal arrangement. And I think they they've been forced to fall in the same category that they essentially oppose.
Okay, let me ask Etochello for his opinion on that. I mean, do you believe this could all have been avoided if the government had arguably done its job better to bring a sense of unification among different groups and the infighting within Ethiopia? Or is there so much division that it really has just become a case of, you know, one man's terrorist is really another man's freedom fighter, especially when it comes to the Amhara and Fano forces?
Thank you for having me. I think it's both, but we need first to see the Amhara conflict in its different layers, I would say. Yes, I heard when Eskinder Nega was talking about how ethnic-based conflicts are, you know, wreaking havoc, you know, all over the country. That's, of course, part of, you know, the current challenge of the country, of course. But for me, the challenge is that Eskinder and his organization have recently released a political manifesto under the name of the Amhara People's Front. And in their manifesto, they clearly laid out that they are fighting for the Amhara people in their perspective. So what I'm just indicating here is, even if, you know, there are strong critics against, you know, ethnic-based arrangements in Ethiopia, but many of the organizations, especially even in Amhara region right now, are fighting under that umbrella.
So are you saying you think there's a contradiction here? And that they're saying they want unity, but they're also fitting the definition, as some would say, of that ethno-nationalist rebel movement?
They do. I mean, in many ways, even especially after 2018, many militia groups, I would say, or militia actors have been organized in Amhara region, and mostly, as you also indicated in your question to Eskinder, the territorial ambitions, especially with regard to Tigray and the other parts of Ethiopia, there are strongly ethno-nationalist basis, you know, movements in Amhara region as there are in other parts of the country. So instead of seeing, you know, the problem solely, you know, allying it to the constitutional problem, there are also other fundamental, you know, inherent issues in Ethiopia that not only the government but also the other armed actors should really face if, you know, a sustainable peace is going to come in the country.
Okay, I mean, Omar, many would say that contradiction we just mentioned has become kind of symbolic of Ethiopia now, because on one hand you have people calling for unity and end to the war, but then you have so much interethnic tension and switching of sides, especially in the case of Amhara and Tigray, for example. The problem is now we have this conflict in Amhara, And unlike Tigray, international mediators don't seem as interested in helping resolve this conflict. I mean, where does that leave Ethiopia? Is that for better or for worse?
I think it leaves Ethiopia for worse, as this conflict, low scale as it may be, compared to the large scale engagements that we saw during the conflict in Tigray. The conflict in Amhara and in parts of Oromia cover a wider area, cover several spots, and affect a larger part of the country in terms of population and landmass. So the effect is devastating, and as it continues, it will continue to drag Ethiopia back, not just as a nation on its own, that just the damage that it is doing economically, socially, and human costs and everything, but it's also dwarfing Ethiopia's regional and international stature because it is bogged down in this conflict. And as to the irony between uh, being an ethno-nationalist organization or movement and at the same time advocating for a national unity, I think that's the characteristics of most political movements and elites in Ethiopia these days. And I would say the solution out of that is for everyone to understand and realize that the choices are simply two. One, to continue to bleed in all aspects across the country for eternity, and sort of mutual or collective, in our case, in Ethiopia's case, a collective distraction path, or to agree to make compromises, to let go of past grievances, distant past, recent past, it doesn't matter, or let go of all grievances and differences, make major compromises in political, demands, so to say, in political, social, and other economic or territorial demands, major concessions, and then come out of this quagmire and move on to a better and perhaps stronger and prosperous Ethiopia, or continue to lead together.
Yeah, Getachew, how realistic do you think it is to envision that happening, this kind of everybody letting go of their past grievances, accepting that they need to unify no matter which ethnic force and militia they might have come from? Because the bottom line is this is being looked at now as a conflict that could potentially become as bad as Tigray. And even in the case of Tigray, we're seeing the Pretoria Agreement seem to fall by the wayside. It's not working anymore, many would argue. And there's been border conflicts now just between Tigray and Afar, and more drone attacks are being alleged. So again, is the prospect for unity realistic in Ethiopia?
I don't think so. I think regardless whether unity will come in Ethiopia in the very recent, like in the near future maybe, but or not, the role of the administration, the government of Ethiopia right now is very clear. It's using violence, whether it is in Oromia or Amhara or all over the country. So in assessing the demands of the Ethiopian people, many of our international actors should genuinely see if the Ethiopian government has the interest, to really make peace with its people and different either ethnic or political parties all over the country. As you indicated, yes, the Pretoria Agreement has not been implemented, where even kind of, for lack of better words, forecasting maybe a probable war, between different groups because of the lack of the implementation of the Pretoria Agreement.
Okay.
At the same time, though, the Amhara militia and the Amhara Fano groups are, military organizations, as you have also indicated in your question, who have participated or who have perpetrated an egregious, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity in Tigray. And according to some credible reports coming out of, the region, still there are, serious, crimes, on civilian Amharas, like it could
Right.
be extortion, kidnappings, and
Okay.
other crimes.
Indeed. Getachew, very unfortunately, we're going to have to make that the final word because we're completely out of time. In fact, overtime for this edition of the Newsmakers. So I'd like to thank both of you so much for being with me and our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We will see you next time.